Everyone falls silent. Every head turns. Kofi walks through the crowd with a woman beside him. Her clothes are torn, her feet bare, her face hidden beneath a tattered shawl. The elders freeze mid-conversation. Children point. Women cover their mouths in shock. Chief Elder Osei steps forward, his staff striking the ground.
Kofi, what madness is this? You bring this creature to announce as your bride?
His voice booms across the square. The woman doesn't flinch, doesn't speak, just stands there like a shadow.
Fair African Tales. Subscribe and turn on the bell for new stories.
The village of Asuam sits cradled between red clay hills and dense forests where the ancestors are said to still walk. It's the kind of place where everyone knows your name, your father's name, and exactly how much land your grandfather left you. Market day transforms the centre square into a riot of colour. Women balancing baskets of yams on their heads, men arguing over goat prices, children weaving between legs like schools of fish. The air smells of palm oil, smoked fish, and ambition. Because in Asuam, your worth is measured in 3 things: your family name, your land, and who you marry. Kofi is old enough to get married but still remains single. His father died young, his mother just 6 months ago, leaving him alone in a small house at the village edge where the forest creeps close and the shadows grow long. He's a carpenter, and a good one, but his hands are always stained with sawdust and his pockets always empty. The women call him that sweet boy with nothing to offer. The men call him the one who will die alone. He's 28 years old, and according to the village elders, his time is running out. You need a wife, Kofi, Chief Elder Osei tells him one sweltering afternoon, his voice heavy with the authority of 70 years and 3 wives. A man without a woman is like a tree without roots. You'll topple in the first storm. Kofi nods politely, sawdust still clinging to his hair. The elder has brought photographs, yes, photographs, of eligible women, daughters of farmers, nieces of traders, each one evaluated like livestock. This one has wide hips for childbearing. That one comes with 2 acres of cocoa farmland. This one is ugly but obedient. Kofi looks at these faces and feels nothing. Not disgust, not interest, just emptiness. These women look through him, not at him. They see his poverty and turn their painted faces away. "Thank you, Elder," Kofi says softly. "I'll think about it." The elder's eyes narrow. "Don't think too long, boy. The good ones won't wait forever." But Kofi isn't thinking about the good ones. He's thinking about the woman he saw that morning near the well. She appeared 3 days ago like a ghost materializing from the forest mist. Nobody knows where she came from. Nobody knows her name. She doesn't speak, or won't speak. No one's sure which. She's wrapped in rags so filthy they might have once been any colour, now just the brown-grey of dried mud and despair. Her hair is a matted crown of neglect. Her feet are bare and bleeding. But it's her eyes that haunt Kofi. They're not the eyes of a broken woman. They're watchful, intelligent, scared, yes. But underneath the fear, there's something else. Something that looks like dignity. The village has already made up its mind about her. "Mad woman," they say. "Cursed by the gods," the old women hiss, making protective signs with their fingers. "Probably ran away from a husband who beat her. Probably deserved it," the young men joke, emboldened by afternoon palm wine. She sleeps in the market square, and every morning the vendors sweep around her like she's a pile of refuse they can't quite get rid of. Children throw pebbles. Dogs bark at her. She endures it all in silence, her eyes always moving, always watching, as if she's waiting for something or hiding from something. Kofi first speaks to her on the 4th day of her arrival. He's carrying timber through the market when he sees 3 boys, no older than 12, circling her with sticks. She's backed against a wall, and though her face shows no expression, her hands are trembling. "Which woman? Which woman?" they chant. Something inside Kofi snaps. Enough! His voice carries across the market, and heads turn. The boys scatter like startled birds. Kofi stands between them and the woman, his heart hammering, very aware that everyone is watching. In a village like Asuom, making a scene is worse than committing the crime itself. The woman's eyes meet his for the first time. Up close, he can see they're deep brown, almost black, and in them, he sees something that makes his breath catch. Gratitude, yes, but also warning. As if she's telling him, you don't want this trouble. But Kofi has never been good at taking warnings. "Are you hungry?" he asks. She doesn't answer, but her eyes flicker to the bread in his satchel. He gives it to her. She takes it with trembling hands and eats like someone who hasn't seen food in days, which she probably hasn't. The market watches in scandalized silence. Kwame, Kofi's closest friend since childhood, grabs his arm. "Brother, what are you doing? Everyone's looking." "Let them look," Kofi says quietly. That evening, as the sun bleeds orange across the horizon, Kofi finds her near the village well, trying to wash her hands in the communal bucket. Women are whispering, pulling their children away. Someone's already dumped the water out, forcing her to wait for the next drawing. Kofi fills his own bucket and offers it. This time, she speaks. Her voice is hoarse, barely above a whisper, but the words are clear. "Why are you helping me?" It's not gratitude in her tone, it's genuine confusion, as if kindness is a language she's forgotten. Kofi considers the question. He could give her a noble answer, something about compassion or duty, but the truth is simpler. "Because everyone else is pretending you're not human," he says, "and that doesn't sit right with me." Something shifts in her expression, the smallest crack in a carefully constructed wall. "You should stop," she whispers. "They'll turn on you too." "Maybe," Kofi admits, "but I'll sleep better." That night, the rain comes. Not the gentle evening showers that cool the air and make the earth smell sweet, but the violent, angry rain that the old people say carries the wrath of disappointed ancestors. Thunder shakes the walls. Lightning turns night into flickering day. Kofi lies in his small house listening to water hammer his tin roof, and he thinks about the woman. Where is she right now? Still in the market square, drowning in the downpour, huddled under a vendor's stall, shivering? He tells himself it's not his problem. He tells himself he's done enough. He tells himself that getting more involved would be foolish. But then he remembers her eyes, those watchful, dignified eyes, and he's pulling on his cloth wrap and running into the storm before he can talk himself out of it. He finds her exactly where he knew he would, collapsed near the well, soaked through, her body curled into itself. She's conscious but trembling violently, her lips blue. Fever probably, or exhaustion, or both. "Come on," Kofi says, lifting her. She weighs almost nothing. "No," she protests weakly. "You can't, I don't care what they'll say." He carries her through the storm to his house, kicks open the door, and lays her near the fire. He wraps her in his mother's old cloth, the good one, the one he was saving, and makes her drink hot ginger tea. She fights him at first, then gives in, too weak to resist. The fever breaks near dawn. She opens her eyes and finds him sitting across the room, watching to make sure she's still breathing. "You're a fool," she whispers. "So I've been told. They'll destroy you for this. They can try." She studies him for a long moment, and for the first time, something like a smile ghosts across her cracked lips. "What's your name?" "Kofi." She nods slowly. "I'm Amma." It's not her real name. Kofi can tell by the way she hesitates before saying it, but it's a gift nonetheless. A name is trust. A name is the beginning of something. "Well, Amma," Kofi says, "you're welcome to stay until you're strong enough to wherever you're going." She doesn't answer, but her eyes say what her mouth won't. "I have nowhere to go. The village finds out by sunrise." Of course they do. In a Suom, secrets last about as long as morning mist. By the time Kofi opens his door, there's already a small crowd gathered outside. Not quite a mob, but getting there. Chief Elder Osei stands at the front, his face carved from displeasure. "Kofi Mensa," the elder's voice booms. "Is it true you've brought that woman into your home?" Kofi doesn't flinch. "She was dying in the rain. So you let her die. You don't bring a curse under your own roof." Murmurs of agreement ripple through the crowd. Women clutch their children. Men shake their heads. Kofi's friend Kwame pushes through, his face a mask of concern and frustration. "Brother, please," Kwame hisses. "Send her away. I'll even help her get to the next village, but you can't keep her here. Think about your reputation. Think about your future." "I am thinking about my future," Kofi says calmly. "I'm thinking about being able to look at myself in the morning." "You're thinking about being a fool," someone shouts from the crowd. "Maybe," Kofi agrees, "but she stays." The crowd explodes. Accusations fly like weapons. Devil worshipper, bewitched, insane. But Kofi stands firm in his doorway, and eventually, they disperse, spitting their disgust into the dust. But the damage is done. The line has been drawn. Kofi against the village. Weeks pass, then months. Amma recovers, slowly, carefully. She doesn't speak much, but she works. Oh, how she works. She tends Kofi's small garden with knowledge that seems impossible for a beggar. She cooks meals that taste like something from another life. She mends his clothes with stitches so precise they look like art. And Kofi. Kofi falls in love, not with her beauty, though as she heals, he notices she's younger than he thought, maybe his age, with features that might have been striking before hardship carved them hollow, not with gratitude because she offers none, but with her presence, the way she hums while working. The way she watches the stars at night as if reading messages written in constellations. The way she treats him like an equal, not a savior. On the night he decides, the moon is full and the village is celebrating a harvest festival Kofi wasn't invited to. He can hear their drums and laughter in the distance, the sound of a community that's already forgotten he exists. "Amma," he says, "I want to ask you something." She looks up from the fire, and in the flickering light, he sees fear flash across her face. "You don't have to tell me where you came from," he continues. "You don't have to tell me what you're running from. You don't even have to tell me your real name, but I want you to stay, not as a guest, as my wife." The silence that follows feels like falling. "You don't know what you're asking," Amma finally whispers. "I know exactly what I'm asking. They'll hate you forever. They already do. I bring danger, Kofi, more than you understand. Then we'll face it together." Tears stream down her face, the first tears he's seen from her, and she nods. just once. But it's enough. The wedding is an insult to everything the village holds sacred. Only the priest attends, and only because Kofi pays him double. No family, no friends, no celebration, just two people standing before God and speaking vows that might as well be declarations of war. But the village comes anyway, not to celebrate, to mock. They line the path from the church to Kofi's house like a gauntlet of judgment. Women spit, men laugh, children throw mud that splatters Amma's one clean cloth. The names they call her would make ancestors weep, witch, whore, curse, death. And Kofi, poor, foolish, beautiful Kofi, they save special venom for him. The fool married the beggar. His bloodline ends here. Even the dogs wouldn't take her. Through it all, Kofi holds Amma's hand. Her whole body trembles, but she doesn't cry, doesn't hide. She walks with her head high, and Kofi understands in that moment that he hasn't married a beggar at all. He's married a queen in disguise. They reach his small house, their house now, and close the door on the jeering crowd. Inside, finally alone, Amma collapses into his arms and sobs like the sky breaking open. "I'm sorry," she whispers. "I'm so sorry." "Never apologize for being seen," Kofi says, and means it. Outside, the laughter continues long into the night. The village has spoken. Kofi is a fool. Amma is a curse. And their story should end here, in humiliation and despair. But here's the thing about stories that everyone thinks they know the ending to. Sometimes the universe has a different script prepared. Sometimes the person everyone throws away turns out to be exactly what the world needs. And sometimes, the greatest fool in the village is actually the only one wise enough to see the truth. On a Tuesday morning, 3 months after the wedding, Kofi woke to find Amma standing in their garden, barefoot in the red clay soil, her hands buried wrist-deep in earth that had refused to yield anything but rocks and disappointment for 5 years. She was whispering something, not quite a prayer, not quite a song, in a language Kofi didn't recognize. The sun was barely awake, painting the sky in shades of amber and promise. And for a moment, Kofi just watched her. This woman who'd become his wife, this mystery wrapped in slowly healing flesh. "What are you doing?" he asked. She turned, and there was something in her eyes, something ancient and knowing that made his breath catch. "Thanking the earth," she said simply. "It's been ignored for too long." Kofi didn't understand. But 3 weeks later, when green shoots erupted from soil that village farmers had declared dead, when tomatoes grew fat and red as sunsets, when yam vines climbed toward heaven like they were racing each other home, then he began to wonder. The garden that had been his shame became a wonderland. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to him in months found excuses to walk past his fence, their eyes hungry and confused. "How?" Kwame asked one evening, staring at vegetables that seemed to mock the natural order. "Kofi, how is this possible?" Kofi looked at Amma, who was pulling weeds with careful precision, and he saw her shoulders tense. "Hard work," he said, "and good soil." But they both knew he was lying, and Kwame knew it too. Because in a village where everyone plants the same seeds in the same earth under the same sun, one man's garden doesn't become Eden while his neighbor's plots barely survive. Not without help. Not without something the villagers didn't have a name for but were starting to fear. The whispers began again, different this time, not mockery anymore. Something darker, something that sounded like accusation. Witchcraft. But here's what the villagers didn't see, couldn't see, because they'd already decided who Amma was. Every evening, she walked the perimeter of their small plot of land, touching the earth with reverence, whispering words that sounded like benedictions. She collected rainwater under full moons. She hung herbs Kofi had never heard of in patterns that seemed random, but probably weren't. And slowly, deliberately, she was turning their patch of forgotten land into something that defied explanation. Was it magic? Was it knowledge? Or was it simply what happens when someone who actually understands the language of growing things is finally given soil to speak to? I'll let you decide. But the village had already made up its mind. The second miracle was harder to explain away. 6 months into the marriage that shouldn't have survived 6 days, a merchant from 3 villages away arrived in Asuom looking for a carpenter. Not just any carpenter, a master craftsman who could build furniture for the regional governor's new residence. The kind of commission that could change a poor man's life, the kind of opportunity that usually went to established builders with reputations and connections. The merchant's name was Tano, and he walked past every carpenter's workshop in Asuom, past Master Ebo with his 20 years of experience, past the chief's nephew with his fancy imported tools, and stopped at Kofi's humble shed at the edge of the village. "You're Kofi Mensah?" Tano asked. "Yes, sir. I was told you're the best carpenter in this region, that your work has integrity." Kofi blinked. "Told by whom?" The merchant smiled mysteriously. "Someone who knows quality when they see it." The commission was massive. Tables, chairs, cabinets, enough work to keep Kofi busy for months and pay enough to rebuild his entire house. He accepted in a daze, and that night, when he told Amma, she simply smiled that small, knowing smile that was becoming familiar. "You deserve this," she said. "But how did he even hear about me? I'm nobody." "Maybe," Amma said softly, stirring their evening soup. "You were always somebody. You just needed someone to see it." The furniture Kofi built over the next 3 months was the finest work of his life. His hands moved with a confidence he'd never possessed before. The wood seemed to bend to his will. Every joint was perfect. Every curve was grace made solid. When merchant Tano came to inspect the finished pieces, he stood in silence for a full minute before speaking. "These aren't furniture," he whispered. "These are art." He paid Kofi triple the agreed price and gave him his card. "When you're ready to think bigger than this village, find me." The commission transformed Kofi's life. Suddenly, he had money, respect from neighbouring villages, a reputation spreading like morning light across the region. But in Asuom, his own village, the place he'd lived his entire life, the warmth he expected never came. Instead, there was something else, something that felt like the air before lightning strikes. Envy. And envy in a small village where everyone knows everyone's business and no one is supposed to rise above their station is more dangerous than hatred. Because envy doesn't just want you to fail, it wants to be the one who makes you fall. But before envy could sharpen its knives, the third miracle arrived, and this one the entire village witnessed. The storm came without warning on a November evening when the Harmattan winds should have been bringing only dust and dry air. But this storm, this wasn't natural. The sky turned the colour of old bruises. Wind screamed like wounded animals. Rain fell in sheets so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And then the lightning started. Not distant flashes, but immediate, violent strikes that hit the earth like divine punishment. The village had survived bad storms before, but this was different. This was personal. Lightning struck the chief's compound. His prize mango tree exploded into flames. It struck the market square. Vendor stalls collapsed like broken dreams. It struck homes indiscriminately, and within an hour, half the village was either on fire or flooded or both. People ran for shelter, screaming prayers to ancestors who seemed to have turned their faces away. But at the edge of the village, in the small house where the fool and his curse bride lived, something impossible was happening. The storm raged around Kofi's house, around it, not through it. Rain fell everywhere except on his roof. Lightning struck to the left, to the right, behind, in front, but never, not once, touched his property. His garden stood untouched while his neighbour's fence was ripped from the ground. His walls remained firm while houses 50 metres away lost their roofs to the wind. It was as if an invisible dome protected them, as if the storm itself had been given instructions: destroy everything except that place, except those people. Kofi stood at his window, watching the chaos, his heart hammering. Amma stood beside him, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Amma," Kofi whispered, "what's happening?" "I don't know," she said, but her voice carried the weight of a lie. "Amma, please, what's happening?" She closed her eyes. "Protection." "From what? From who?" "From me," she whispered. "Or for me. I'm never sure which." The storm lasted 3 hours. When it finally exhausted itself and limped away like a defeated beast, the village emerged to assess the damage. Homes destroyed, crops ruined, livestock dead. The cost was catastrophic. And then someone, no one remembers who, but does it matter, pointed toward Kofi's house, standing perfect, untouched, almost mocking in its completeness. The crowd that gathered wasn't grateful. They weren't relieved that at least one family had been spared. No, because in a tragedy, one man's salvation looks like evidence of guilt. In a disaster, the person who doesn't suffer must have caused it. That's how village logic works. That's how fear thinks. Chief Elder Osei's voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a machete through sugarcane. Witchcraft. The word hung in the air, ugly and final. "That woman brought this storm," someone shouted. "She cursed us." "She's a demon." Kofi stepped out of his house, his heart in his throat, ready to defend Amma against the mob he could feel forming. But before he could speak, a voice cut through the chaos, weak but clear. "Stop!" Everyone turned. Old Mama Efwa, the village's eldest, leaning on her grandson's arm, pointed one gnarled finger at the crowd. "You fools!" she rasped. "The storm didn't start at their house. It didn't end there. If she brought it, why would she protect herself? If she cursed us, why didn't she curse them too?" The old woman's eyes swept the crowd with contempt. "You see a blessing and call it a curse because your pride can't handle that the man you mocked is prospering while you suffer. Shame on you, shame on all of you." Silence. Then slowly, reluctantly, the crowd dispersed. But the damage was done. The accusation had been spoken. And in a village where words have power, accusations become truth through repetition. That night, lying beside Amma in the darkness, Kofi asked the question he'd been avoiding for months. "Who are you?" She didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Someone who's been running for so long I forgot what it feels like to stand still." "Running from what?" "From people who would hurt me, use me, people who see me as a thing to possess, not a person to love." "Are we safe here?" Amma's silence was answer enough. Year 1 became Year 2. Year 2 became Year 3. And with each passing season, the pattern became undeniable. Kofi and Amma prospered. Not extravagantly, they weren't suddenly rich, but steadily, surely, as if fortune itself had decided to make their house its resting place. Kofi's carpentry business expanded. Amma's garden fed them and half the neighbouring villages. They bought a goat, then chickens, then a small plot of additional land. And the village watched. Oh, how they watched! Some watched with grudging respect. Mama Ifua brought them gifts. A few brave souls asked Amma for gardening advice, which she gave freely. Young couples who'd been kind during the mockery years ago now found their own luck improving when Amma visited their homes. But others, led by Boateng, the chief's son, a man whose cruelty was matched only by his mediocrity, watched with calculation. Because prosperity, when you haven't earned it yourself, looks like theft. Success, when it's not yours, feels like a personal insult. Boateng's resentment had been building since the wedding. He'd expected Kofi to fail, to come crawling back to the village begging for forgiveness, to prove that the natural order was right. Some people are meant to be poor, and fools deserve their fate. But instead, Kofi was thriving. And worse, he was doing it without needing the village's approval. That was the real crime, not the success, the independence. So Boateng began to plot. And in a small village where boredom breeds mischief and envy breeds malice, he found willing conspirators. The poisoning was clumsy. They dumped bitter herbs into Kofi's well under cover of darkness, the kind that would cause sickness but not death. Just enough to remind him of his place. But the next morning, when Amma went to draw water, she stopped at the well's edge, stared into its depths, and shook her head. "We're not using this water today," she told Kofi. "Why not? It looks fine. Trust me." They used rainwater instead. By afternoon, 3 goats that had drunk from the public stream, fed by the same underground water as Kofi's well, were dead. The connection was obvious. Someone had poisoned the water. But Amma had known. Somehow, impossibly, she had known. Boateng's second attempt was more vicious. Rumours, whispers that spread like disease through the village. They said Amma was seducing men, that she danced naked under the full moon, that she'd been seen in the forest talking to spirits. None of it was true. Amma barely left their home except to tend the garden and visit the market. But truth doesn't matter when lies are more entertaining. For weeks, the whispers grew louder. Women crossed the street when Amma approached. Men made crude gestures. The priest, the same one who'd married them, suggested Amma should be examined for marks of the devil. Kofi felt his world tilting. How do you fight accusations that dissolve like mist when you confront them directly, but reform behind your back? How do you prove someone didn't do something when the accusers don't care about proof? But then something unexpected happened. A young man, the same one who'd been part of the boys who'd thrown stones at Amma years ago, came forward. He'd grown into a farmer with a wife and new baby, and he stood in the village square and told the truth. "I've been watching," he said, "because I wanted to see if the rumours were true, and what I saw was a woman who works hard, who helps her neighbours, who's never been anything but kind. But I also saw something else. I saw Boateng and his friends sneaking around their property at night. I saw them dump something in the well. I heard them making up lies." He looked directly at Boateng. "You want to destroy them because they're happy and you're not, because they succeeded where you thought they'd fail, and that makes you a coward and a liar." The village square erupted. Boateng denied everything, but his friends' faces betrayed them. Chief Elder Osei, embarrassed that his own son had brought such shame, ordered a village trial. The trial was swift and brutal. Evidence emerged. Witnesses came forward. Boateng's lies collapsed like a house built on sand. In the end, he was publicly shamed, forced to apologize, and stripped of his position as the chief's heir apparent. Kofi and Amma were vindicated, but vindication doesn't erase damage. It doesn't restore trust. And as Kofi and Amma walked home that evening through a village that now looked at them with confused respect, Amma's hands were shaking. "It's getting worse," she whispered that night. "What is?" "The attention, the questions. The more we're noticed, the closer they get." "Who, Amma? Who's getting closer?" She looked at him with eyes full of ancient fear. "The people I ran from. They're looking for me. They've always been looking. And success is a beacon that's impossible to hide." Kofi pulled her close. "Then let them come. We'll face them together." But even as he said it, he felt the weight of something larger than village gossip, heavier than local envy. He felt destiny circling, patient and inevitable as seasons. Years 4 and 5 passed in relative peace, but it was the peace of held breath, of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Amma grew quieter, more watchful. She started at sudden noises. Sometimes Kofi woke at night to find her standing at the window, staring at the road that led out of the village as if expecting demons to march down it. And then one morning in Year 6, a stranger appeared in Aswam. Just one man, well-dressed, polite, asking questions at the market. Had anyone seen a woman matching Amma's description? He had a drawing, crude but recognizable. He offered money for information. He said he was looking for someone on behalf of a concerned family. The villagers, who'd learned their lesson about interfering in Kofi and Amma's business, told him nothing. But word reached Kofi anyway, the way bad news always travels faster than good. When he told Amma, she went pale. "They found me." "Who?" "It doesn't matter who. What matters is they're getting closer." "Then we'll leave. Tonight. We'll go somewhere they can't, there's nowhere they can't reach, Kofi." Amma's voice cracked. "These aren't village gossips or jealous neighbors. These are people with resources, power. They won't stop until they have what they want." "What do they want?" Amma's silence was heavier than any answer. That night, Kofi noticed something he'd somehow missed before: scars on Amma's back, revealed when her cloth slipped as she prepared for sleep. Not the scars of accident or illness. These were deliberate, patterned, the kind left by systematic cruelty. "Amma," he breathed, "who did this to you?" She pulled the cloth tight, hiding the evidence. "People I refused." "Refused what?" "Everything they wanted. My name, my freedom, my life." Kofi's hands clenched into fists. "Tell me who they are." "You can't fight them, Kofi. They're not people you fight. They're people you survive." But Kofi was done with patience, done with fragments of truth. "I married you 7 years ago without knowing who you were. I've stood by you through mockery and accusations and worse. I've loved you without conditions. But Amma, please, if danger is coming, I need to know what we're facing." "And finally, she told him, not everything. But enough. She was educated, from a wealthy family. There had been a man, a powerful man, a forced arrangement, betrayal within her own household, violence, an escape that should have killed her but didn't, and 7 years of hiding, of becoming invisible, of surviving by erasing every trace of who she'd been. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have told you, but I thought if you didn't know you'd be safe." Kofi pulled her into his arms. "We're in this together, whatever comes." and something was coming. They both felt it, could taste it in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Year 7 arrived like a judgment. More strangers appeared, not one at a time anymore, but in groups, well organized, asking specific questions, offering larger rewards. They had resources, authority. They moved through the village like a net tightening. And then one humid evening, when the sun hung low and red as an accusation, they came. Not strangers this time, an entire procession, armed men on horses, an elderly man in clothes that screamed wealth and power, a woman who looked like an older version of Amma, her face carved by years of grief. The village gathered, sensing drama, sensing revelation, sensing that the strange, impossible story of Kofi and his beggar bride was about to reach some kind of conclusion. The elderly man dismounted in the center of the village square. Chief Elder Osi approached, confusion and concern warring on his face. "Who are you?" the elder asked. The old man's voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "My name is Elder Mensa. I am head of the Mensa trading dynasty from the coastal region, and I am searching for my daughter." A murmur rippled through the crowd. A trading dynasty. These weren't just wealthy people. These were the kind of people who influenced governors, who controlled trade routes, who made villages like Asuom appear and disappear with economic decisions. "We've been searching for 7 years, Elder Mensa continued. "My daughter fled our home under tragic circumstances. We believed her dead. But recently, we received word of a woman in this village, a woman who matches her description, a woman of unusual knowledge and grace, despite living in poverty, a woman who goes by the name—" His voice cracked. "Amma." The village square went silent. Every eye turned toward Kofi's house at the edge of the square. And slowly, like a ghost materializing from memory, Amma emerged. She stood in her doorway, wearing simple clothes, her hair wrapped in plain cloth, her feet bare. But the way she held herself, head high, shoulders back, eyes clear, suddenly made sense. This wasn't a beggar who'd learned dignity. This was dignity that had worn beggar's clothes. The elderly man saw her, his face transformed. "Amara." The name hung in the air like a revelation. Not Amma, Amara. The woman beside him, the older woman, gasped and collapsed to her knees. "My daughter! My daughter!" And just like that, everything the village thought it knew shattered like pottery, dropped from a great height. What does it feel like when your entire understanding of reality shifts in a single moment? When the person you thought you knew becomes someone else entirely? When the story you believed turns out to be just the cover of a much deeper book? The village of Asuom was about to find out. Elder Mensa stood in the center of the square, his expensive robes dusty from travel, his eyes locked on the woman in the doorway, the woman they'd called a beggar, a curse, a nobody, the woman who was apparently his daughter. "Amara," he said again, his voice breaking on the syllables. "Is it really you?" Amara stepped forward slowly, and Kofi noticed something he'd never seen before. She moved differently now, not with the careful invisibility of someone trying not to be noticed, but with the natural grace of someone who'd been trained from birth to carry herself like royalty. It had been there all along, hidden under layers of survival. But now, with her secret exposed, she couldn't hide it anymore. "Father," she said softly, and the word seemed to cost her something. The older woman, her mother, rushed forward, arms outstretched, but Amara stepped back, not rejecting her, but needing space, needing control. "Wait," Amara said. "Before anything else, before you take me anywhere, they need to know. This village needs to know who I am and why I left. They deserve the truth." Elder Mensa nodded slowly. "Then tell them." And she did. Amara's voice carried across the square, clear and strong, as she unraveled a story that sounded like something from the old tales the grandmothers told. Except this was real. She was born into the Mensa dynasty, raised in wealth and comfort, educated beyond what most women were allowed. Her family controlled trade routes from the coast to the interior. They were respected, powerful, connected to governors and chiefs across the region. But power, Amara said, her eyes scanning the crowd, attracts vultures. 7 years ago, a man named Nana Owusu, a minor nobleman with major ambitions, decided the fastest path to controlling her family's wealth was through marriage. Not to any of the Mensa sons, but to Amara herself. He courted her with gifts and promises. When she refused, he changed tactics. He fabricated evidence, accused her father of treason, bribed officials, and systematically destroyed her family's reputation. The goal was simple: force Amara into marriage by making her family so desperate they'd accept any lifeline. "He almost succeeded," Amara said quietly. "My father was arrested, our assets were frozen, our allies abandoned us. And Owusu arrived with an offer: marry him and the charges disappear. Refuse, and my father dies in prison." The village square was silent except for the wind moving through the trees. "I was 20 years old," Amara continued, "and I knew that if I married him, my family might be saved, but I'd be destroyed. So I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I staged my own death, left evidence of a drowning, and disappeared into the countryside. I thought—" Her voice cracked. "I thought if I was gone, Owusu would lose interest, that my family would be released, that everyone would be safer without me." Elder Mensa's face was wet with tears. "We mourned you, child. For 3 years, we mourned you." "And I mourned myself," Amara said. "I became Amma, a ghost, a nobody. I moved from village to village, staying invisible, trusting no one, until I came here, until—" She turned to look at Kofi, who stood frozen, trying to process everything. "Until someone saw me when I was invisible. Someone treated me like a human being when the world had decided I wasn't. Someone chose me when I had nothing to offer." The crowd's eyes shifted to Kofi. Poor, simple, foolish Kofi, who suddenly didn't look foolish at all. Elder Mensa walked toward him, and Kofi felt his legs tremble. This man could buy and sell the entire village without noticing the expense. This man had armies of workers, connections to power structures Kofi couldn't even imagine. And Kofi had unknowingly married his daughter. But instead of anger, Elder Mensa did something unexpected. He knelt. Right there in the village square, this powerful, wealthy man dropped to his knees in the dust before a poor carpenter. "You saved my daughter's life," Elder Mensa said. "When the world was hunting her, you gave her shelter. When everyone mocked her, you gave her dignity. When she had nothing, you gave her everything that mattered. How do I repay a debt like that?" Kofi's voice, when he finally found it, was steady. "You don't. I didn't do it for payment. I did it because it was right." Something shifted in the crowd. Shame rippled through them like wind through grass. Because they were seeing, perhaps for the first time, what they'd done, who they'd mocked, what they'd tried to destroy. Chief Elder Ursi stepped forward, his face grey. "Amara. Lady Amara. We didn't know. If we'd known who you were—" If you'd known who I was, Amara cut him off, her voice sharp as broken glass, you would have treated me differently, and that's exactly the problem. My worth shouldn't depend on my father's name or my family's wealth. My worth is inherent. Every human's worth is inherent. But you couldn't see that. You saw rags and decided I was worthless. You saw poverty and decided I was cursed. You saw someone different and decided to be cruel. The silence that followed was suffocating. Boateng, the chief's son, who'd led the campaign against them, looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him. Women who'd spat at Amara covered their faces. Men who'd laughed shifted their feet and stared at the ground. But here's what I learned living among you, Amara continued, her voice softening. I learned that one person's kindness can outweigh 1,000 people's cruelty. I learned that dignity isn't something given by society, it's something you carry inside. I learned that the opinion of the crowd means nothing compared to the integrity of one good person. She reached for Kofi's hand. And I learned what real love looks like. Not the performative kind that depends on status and approval, but the quiet kind that shows up in storms and stands firm when everyone else walks away. Elder Mensah stood, composing himself. My daughter is right. And though you don't deserve it, I want you to know that the charges against Nana Owusu have been proven false. He's been arrested for fraud, bribery, and attempted murder. Justice, though delayed, has arrived. My family's name is cleared, and Amara, he turned to his daughter, you're free. Free to come home, free to reclaim your life, free to have everything that was stolen from you. The offer hung in the air, magnificent and terrifying. Come home. Return to wealth, comfort, status. Leave behind this small village, this small house, this small life. Every eye turned to Amara. What would she choose? She looked at Kofi, really looked at him, and smiled. I am home. I've been home for 7 years. I just didn't recognize it at first because I thought home was a place. But home isn't walls and roofs and family estates. Home is where someone sees you completely and loves you anyway. Home is where you're safe to be yourself. Home is... She squeezed his hand. Home is standing beside someone who stood beside you when you had nothing. Elder Mensah smiled through his tears. Then we'll bring home to you. And they did. Over the following weeks, the Mensah family didn't take Amara away. They invested in Kofi and Amara's life right there in Aswam. They bought land, built a proper house, established Kofi's carpentry as an official business with resources and connections. They brought teachers, doctors, and opportunities to the entire village, not as punishment, but as blessing. Not because the village deserved it, but because Amara and Kofi chose grace over revenge. The transformation was stunning. The couple who'd been mocked were now honored. The house that had been targeted was now protected. The names that had been dragged through mud were now spoken with respect. And the villagers, some genuinely changed. Mama Efua became Amara's close friend. The young farmer who'd defended them became Kofi's business partner. Even Kwame, Kofi's friend who'd begged him to send Ama away, apologized with tears and became fiercely loyal. But others, like Boateng, like the chief who'd called for their exile, faded into obscurity. Haunted by their own cruelty, unable to meet the eyes of the people they'd tried to destroy. 7 years after the village laughed at a wedding, they gathered again. But this time it was to celebrate, to honor, to bow before the couple they'd once scorned. Kofi stood with Amara, his wife, his partner, his equal, and looked out at faces that had once mocked him. He felt no triumph, no vindication, just peace. Because he'd learned something the village was only beginning to understand. Your value doesn't come from the crowd's approval. Your worth isn't determined by your circumstances. Your dignity can't be stolen by mockery or given by applause. It's who you are when no one's watching. It's what you do when the right choice is the hard choice. It's how you treat people who can't do anything for you. That's the measure of a person. That's the definition of wealth. That's what it means to be truly rich. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it changed something in how you see the world, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Post it. Talk about it. Because the village laughed when they should have learned. Don't make the same mistake. I'll be reading every comment, I'll be hearing your stories. And together, maybe we can build a world where fewer people are invisible, where kindness isn't considered foolish, and where love is recognized as the ultimate form of wealth. Your move. Tell me your story.